Hi, and welcome to Blue Square Security, hosted by the Microsoft Digital Security Specialist team, a podcast dedicated to cybersecurity with guests from all over the industry, both inside and outside Microsoft, to bring you as many perspectives as possible.
Maybe you don't get a blinky flashy thing. Maybe you get a hard no and say, not so fast. Slow down, Seabiscuit. What I mean, it's those guidelines.
That was just a quick snippet of our conversation with Grady Boggs, a Microsoft veteran and a security specialist here at Microsoft. This week's conversation is focused around privacy. We spend a little bit of time weaving in GDPR and compliance, but a majority of this week's conversation is around privacy and the offering from Microsoft Priva. We appreciate Grady's time and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Thanks so much. Welcome to the 5th episode of Blue Square Security. We are joined today by a security specialist inside Microsoft by the name of Grady Boggs. Instead of me butchering his background, I will let him introduce himself.
Oh, wow, background. Been with Microsoft right at 13 years, always in security in some form or capacity. Started out as a technical specialist, then got recruited to the Azure incubation team, which turned into the Azure GBB team, and then succumbed to the lures of the S plan and started wearing a sport coat and telling jokes about 6 years ago. Prior to Microsoft, I was with a consulting partner called Logic Trends, where we focused on identity and access management. So I used to be a geek, like actually hands on the keyboard. And then prior to that, I pretty much grew up at Atlanta Gas Light here in Atlanta, Georgia, while I was attending Georgia Tech. Had about a 15-year run there all through undergrad, and just was a great place to grow up, get that customer perspective, and kind of learn the game.
Awesome. So just for, the people that may not be Microsoft folks listening or watching, we've got the title of SSP, and then Michael and I are DSEs. Can you give the acronym for your role?
Acronym City.
I don't know. We need to upload those into like Urban Dictionary or something. I need a cheat sheet for all the acronyms, but SSPs, I think it's Solutions, Software Solutions Specialist or something. I don't know. We are traditional technology salespeople, customer facing, owning the relationship with the chief information security officer, and then working with the broader extended V team to align our solutions with the business value that the customer may need. And then I don't know, Mike, you want to talk about the DSR role or?
Yeah, sure. So the digital security specialist is our title for the acronym soup. So DSE. And so yeah, we cover all the security products from a Microsoft perspective, work alongside, guys like Grady. And we're really kind of I call it the boots on the ground, giving customers any information they need around security, and really bringing Grady kind of those quality opportunities around security. That's kind of our role. Greg can add any of his quality 2 cents in if he'd like.
Typically, when I have those conversations with an account, it's basically look at the DSEs as your personal Microsoft library. If you're looking for some data around security, or if you're looking for some personnel around security, you can hit us up first. We're connected to the broader account team. And when things get a little bit more technical and the objective is a little bit more defined, then we bring somebody in like Grady, and the broader account team tends to take over. So that's enough about the folks on this call. Let's get into a little bit of the specifics around security. Last week, we spoke to Keon Williams, and Keon was one of the authors of the, Michael, remind me if the title that he had, he was the author of the book for the CISO certification. And that conversation kind of led us getting into a compliance conversation. And we felt it was probably prudent to have a conversation on the flip side of the compliance coin, which we kind of felt would have been privacy. So privacy can probably go in a number of different directions, whether it's end user, organization wide, role wide, department wide. But great if you could just take as much time as you need to give us a 101 on what Microsoft Priva is, how it's used, what type of customer typically uses it.
Well, you just said take as long as you want. So people typically only say that to me just one time. You're about to learn that the hard way. So keep me reined in on time, just so I don't blow up your entire meeting. But
Fair enough.
this is a Satya level thing, and one of my favorite quotes of his is, and I'm looking on my other monitor so I can read it verbatim. All of us will have to think about the digital experiences we create to really treat privacy as a human right. So there's a certain aspect of privacy in Microsoft in every line of code that we create. Privacy is part of the guide rails and that North Star compass on how we create software. When you ratchet it down to a finer level of detail, there are certain capabilities that we very intentionally include in our software and services. So like within Microsoft 365, you can go and do a data subject request, and you can query your tenant and look for a person's PII if they're asking about that. And, so I mean that we bake in a lot of that capability there, with all of the um, legislation and regulation going on in the world these days. I mean, GDPR was probably the tip of the spear over in Europe. But it's going global. You've got CCPA here in the U.S., out in California. New York has something similar about to pop as well. It may already have. So privacy is important. We view it here at Microsoft as a human right. And all of this regulation, normally I'm not a fan of regulation. I like a minimalist type approach, but in this point, at this time, I think it's needed, and I think it's good because we here at Microsoft, we're already thinking about it that way. So I view it as a very good thing. And we just launched this past year an add-on product called Microsoft Priva that is all about privacy. So when you think about, so I want to chase a squirrel for a minute. So if you think about when legislation and regulation have driven software product development, let's go all the way back to 2007. Where am I going?
07, I'm thinking mobile.
Sarbanes-Oxley.
Oh,
That
there we
is
go.
2007 is when the iPhone launched, but Sarbanes-Oxley. So, any application or system that had a tangible impact to a company's finances or anything publicly traded, that was Sarbanes-Oxley impactful and had to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. So what and that was all about who has access to what, when was the last time that was recertified or attested to, and real quick, and that regulation had teeth, right? I mean, your financials would be in the dumper if you were not Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. So what happened real quick is organizations do what they do. They get compliant by throwing bodies at a problem. And you would have people manually running extracts of who has access to what from each of the Sarbanes systems. And then they would slice it and dice it, put it in a spreadsheet, and then manually email out. I mean, they had to WD-40 their swivel chairs because they would do this, then they would go over here, then they would send out the spreadsheet, then they would get the responses, then they would, do all this. And, then you have to send escalations to the people that don't respond. There are all these workflow aspects to it. And, by the time you get through with one iteration, guess what? it's time to start the next one. I mean, compliance reporting from a spreadsheet and an inbox is no way to go through life. And the result of that, the way the market responded, is software to the rescue, right? That is the single greatest deflationary force in the world is software. And you had startups like Vayu and Avexa and Eurekify and all these little niche companies that did the export the entitlements, manage these workflows, send out the nasty grams, and compile all the results in a nice, pretty audit-worthy format. So that that is how the market responded. Then all those little fish got eaten by bigger fish. I think Oracle bought Avexa, Sun bought Vayu, then Oracle bought Sun, and they kind of gelled into the big box software retailers. And I see a lot of corollaries between Sarbanes-Oxley and GDPR, right? It is regulation that is commanding compliance with real world financial penalties if you drift out of compliance. And how did people respond? They threw bodies at it. And how's the software market responding? They are creating custom software to respond to that need. And that is exactly what we've done with Microsoft Priva, not in terms of Sarbanes-Oxley, but in terms of GDPR and CCPA and the whole privacy as a concept. It's gathering all the relevant data. It is managing all the appropriate workflows associated with that. We automate as much as we can. We provide the workflows for a duly appointed steward or custodian to make a call where they need to. And then we serve up the results of all that in nice, pretty audit-worthy reports through the lenses of the various pieces of regulation. Really cool thing. So, all right.
No, that's perfect.
Did I do all right
No,
on time?
perfect.
That was a
Yeah.
great answer. And
Okay.
there's no time limit here. I mean, obviously we've got a stopping point at some point, but you're the specialist, and that was a phenomenal answer. Listening to you talk about kind of that timeline and talking about what it addresses, who's addressing it, does it address it for? And you mentioned, New York, and you mentioned West Coast, middle of the country. We talked a little bit about that last week when it came to compliance, and we kind of had a soft spot in our heart for the compliance officer because it's not like any other part of IT where you put a box in place to do a very specific job, and either it's healthy or it's not healthy. You've got regulations that are coming from different states, different countries, different segments of business or verticals. And it really does, when you start looking at the compliance officer right next to, the data privacy officer, I'm starting to have that same soft spot because they've got the same kind of struggles of geography and the people that they deal with. And then on top of all that, it's the type of data that they deal with. It's not just data at rest. It's, credit card information or electronic health records. When you speak to somebody at a customer that is in charge of privacy, whether it's a C-suite or somebody that's got their fingers on a keyboard, how are they addressing that moving target? Because you're getting updates from regulatory bodies, but you're also, and this goes across everybody, data grows, data rarely shrinks, and these folks have a job that I now that I understand a little bit better, it's a moving target for a wide variety of reasons.
Yeah. So, I mean, sales 101, right? You meet the customers where they are, and every chief compliance officer out there, chief risk officer, chief whatever officer, whoever is on the hook for that topic, they are acutely aware of their pain points. Their auditors and their internal legal team make them acutely aware of their pain points. So, and a lot of it depends on what industry a customer's in. A lot of it depends on what geographies they operate in. And then it can also vary from auditing firm to auditing firm, right? Different people have different hot buttons at different points in time. But I don't necessarily have any trouble uh, getting the customers to identify their pain points. They already know them because of the auditing firms and their legal team. So it's more, what piece of regulation are you worried about? What are your big initiatives this year? What goals are you trying to achieve? All right, here's what you own from Microsoft. Here's how you can better be using that to reach those goals. And maybe, if appropriate, here are a couple of other things like maybe Priva or Purview or who knows what that might be of interest for you. And let's do a workshop, or let's line them up. That it the moving target of regulation, it's always going to be there, right?
Yeah.
It's global. It's not as scary as you might first think. Um, because all of these regulatory bodies, whether it's CCPA in California, GDPR in Germany, or EU or whatever, they're all driving to the same goal, and that is to be good stewards of personally identifiable information and do the right thing for the end user, the individual. That is the North Star and the guide rails of every single one of these privacy related pieces of regulation. Now, they all do things a little differently, but I would say 70 to 90% overlap. Um, and to answer your question, every customer in charge of that, the C whatever officer, they are acutely aware of that. We just find out what their pain points are and give some suggestions on how to meet those goals.
So their squeaky wheels are plenty squeaky.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
the one thing that kind of comes to mind too is when I think of privacy, the first thing that comes to mind is the healthcare industry, just because a lot of the attacks that make the headlines, if it's a hospital, that makes at least national news, and some of them make global news. What are some of the other verticals that you've seen that have taken the privacy, to the next step and implemented something like Priva that's outside of the healthcare, world? Because that just seems like the most identifiable with privacy, at least to me.
Well, I totally agree with you on the healthcare. My oldest child just turned 18, so now when we take him to the doctor or whatever, he has to give consent for us to have visibility. And I'm like, "Hey, really?"
My
Anyway,
oldest turns
uncharted.
18 next month, so it's one of those things I hadn't even thought about until you just said it.
Oh yeah, uncharted waters, brave new world.
Yeah.
So, I would say the next biggest privacy-focused industry would be FinServ. I mean, economics, financial services. That's a big one, just because of the inherent risk of monetary theft. So they're all about privacy. But outside of those two, I feel like it's almost kind of an even keel across the industries, because they are all uh, impacted. GDPR doesn't care what industry you're in. They care if you have personally identifiable information of a citizen in the European Union. So, you could be uh, Joe's Shirt Shack down on 30A in the Florida Panhandle. And if someone came over from the motherland to, get the groove thing on spring break, and they bought a t-shirt from you and you recorded them in your frequent buyers club or whatever, GDPR can come over here and bite you in the butt.
Yeah.
So, it that doesn't really care about industry. But if I had to name one more where privacy is like really, really big mega, it'd be FinServ right after healthcare.
Yeah. And just to pick your brain a little bit more, what about folks that are in the retail business and are collecting credit card data and spending habits and things like that? Is that typically data that gets stored in a different format so their privacy is protected there as well?
So I kind of lump them in with FinServ. And yes, I do realize retail is a different vertical than financial services, but it's that economic data that kind of made me call that out.
Yeah. So this is the part where if you put on the generalist hat, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about FinServ and credit card data. When I hear that conversation, my brain goes to organization wide. That is organizations that need to put the proper processes in place or the proper prevention technology in place to protect from the top down. What are you seeing from a end user standpoint? Because you can't ignore the human component here with, I accidentally sent Mr. Boggs this spreadsheet which contained XYZ, and that now becomes, my fault. Is there enough training in this space to where, the end user is educated?
Yeah, so you have to help the end users, and that comes through guide rails that can pop up in their tools they use to conduct their day. Maybe it's Outlook, maybe it's Teams, maybe it's SharePoint, maybe it's something else entirely. I don't know. You have to educate the end users, and if you don't do both of those things, you're not going to be successful. You can take the best DLP tools out there. You can take the best file encryption packages out there, and if you have reckless and or dumb end users, you're going to lose. So one of the things I love about the Microsoft 365 platform is the policy tips. I'm sure everyone listening to this has probably opened up Outlook and seen a little blinky flashy thing saying so and so in the to line is outside of your organization, or you don't normally receive mail from so and so. So, be a little bit more scrutinous when you peruse this mail that you just got. So it is that same policy tip engine that we have now infused a whole host of privacy capability. If you are sending a file containing a bunch of names and addresses, and you're sending it to your coworker right on the other side of the cubicle wall in the same department, yeah, okay, that's probably cool. If you are sending that to someone 2 floors up in accounting, that's crossing a boundary there. So maybe you get like a little warning saying, "Hey, bro, you sure you want to do this? Okay, you can do it." If you're sending that same list of names and addresses outside of your organization, maybe you don't get a blinky flashy thing. Maybe you get a hard no and say,
Yeah.
not so fast. Slow down, Seabiscuit. I mean, it's those guidelines, and how much latitude you want to give your users varies from user to user. Some people give certain departments more latitude than others. Some people give certain salary levels more latitude than others. I mean, if you're a director level, it's a reasonable assumption that you can be trusted with data, so you get more latitude. But it is not our job to say who gets how much latitude. It is our job to provide the platform so that the see whatever officer, that's a new role I made up on this call, whoever is responsible for compliance and privacy, they have the palette to paint that picture of thresholds and latitudes that they believe to be appropriate for their organization. That's our job.
And with our tool, how granular can we get that? I mean, is that done by user to user, by department, by organization? You gave a number of examples, but how granular can we actually get?
Yeah, so again, long-winded answer. We're establishing a pattern here. you can get as granular as you need to. Now, I'm a reformed consultant, so my consultative guidance is don't get any more granular than you need to. Keep it simple, stupid, just for sanity's sake, for manageability's sake. But if, start out simple, expand with more granularity as needed, and only do that when it's needed. Not because you want to or because you think it might be a good idea. It has to be a bona fide business or regulatory need for you to go more granular. But
Eh,
the platform can go down to, I mean, you can do the Cartesian product of permissions if you want to. I mean,
Sure.
that don't recommend it, but you can go there.
Yeah. So the more I think about the end user training components, the more I start to think about what the end user is touching. And they're typically leveraging a wide variety of different tools. So if there's something in place like Priva that allows them to have some protection around privacy, that's certainly a good thing. But if they're using, 8 or 10 tools per day because their role demands it, do we have any sort of integration where uh, the rules and regulations that we've identified from the regulatory bodies can start talking to non-Microsoft products?
Yeah, absolutely. It, data protection is a team sport. Obviously, we're going to give you the first and best experience on Microsoft native capabilities, which I mean that's the lion's share of it already. I mean, email, Word docs, PowerPoint, spreadsheets, that's our jam. But the reality is, Preview it's built on the same foundation that is our data classification service, the same thing that Purview runs on. So it's got connectors into dozens of software platforms out there. Any UNC resolvable file path can be incorporated into this and included. We integrate with not all, most of the leading SaaS platforms where you store files. So think Box, Dropbox, G Suite, Salesforce, ServiceNow, all those things. In terms of privacy specific solution softwares out there, Priva is tightly integrated with Security AI, OneTrust, Wirewheel, Big ID, and it all has open APIs. So if you MacGyvered up your own homegrown solution, tap into our APIs and you can play ball. So it's definitely a team sport. And Greg, I'm glad you brought back up the LMS aspects of this, learning management systems, with Viva Learning, which is part of our new Viva suite, which is awesome. Um, the digest each user receives as part of Priva saying, hey, over the past week, here's all your stuff that contains PII. How do you want to remediate this? Maybe you require them to add an annotation. Maybe you require them to assign a label. Maybe you require them to assign a retention policy. I don't know. That's, between y'all. But one of the tie-ins is, hey, if you want to whittle this list down, click on this link for a nice Viva Learning module to better educate you on this, make you more efficient, and get this right coming out of the gate. And this will help to whittle down your digest that we ask you to go through each week. So I love the real-time pop-up guide rails like the policy tips. I love the hard blocks if you're doing something egregious. And I also love kind of that out of band process saying, here's your digest from a privacy perspective. Here's your work queue to go through. And by the way, here's a learning module to go get smarter on this so that you don't have quite as long a list to go through next time. It all integrates.
I mean, I don't care what company you're at. You got to have good training and you got to have those guardrails because I mean, how many times have you started a new role and training wasn't there, it wasn't sufficient, and then you start leaning on your team members, or you just put your hand up, that work-life balance becomes very much work focused very quick.
Yep.
Well, and it's really like when you think about it, that's like a three-pronged approach, right? You've got the approach that says you're kind of empowering the end user, right? Here's a policy tip. Maybe you don't want to do that. You got the second one of, listen, you're not doing that. And then the third one is empowering them with knowledge through an LMS platform, whether it's Viva Sales or pick your flavor. There's a bunch of them out there, but so it's that approach to the training. And I think Priva does a good job of the kind of the empowering the end user part, plus the block. You're not gonna do that part. It kind of doubles it up, right, for the end user.
So when we were preparing for this conversation today, I was looking at trying to find a statistic that was talking about privacy, and the one that jumped out was by 2023, 65% of the world's population will have its personal information covered under modern privacy regulations, which is up from 10% back in 2020. So a big jump from 65 by the end of this year from 10%. What is changing from just a few years ago to 2023 that a statistic like that can take, a 50% bump when it hadn't had, something that large prior?
So this is just me as an individual speculating. This is not an official stance from Microsoft. So
Sure,
just
that's your
put that
asterisk on.
that
Got it.
that caveat out there. I believe it to be the proliferation of bad actors out there. More and more individuals are getting owned, and maybe they're falling victim to ransomware. Maybe they got phished, or maybe they lost access to a bank account, or maybe they got cryptojacked, and I mean, there's all kinds of different levels of getting owned. And I think the regulators, they do what they do. They respond to the needs of the public, and they leverage their tools, which are pen and paper, right? They write laws to better address the needs of the public. And what we're seeing right now is what they're producing with their tools is a whole bunch of privacy regulations and legislation. And like I said in the opening remarks, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Now, I think a more interesting statistic is how, a subject right request. How much do you think one of those costs on average for an organization to fulfill?
Oh, geez, I wouldn't even know where to start on a guess, to be honest.
You put me on the spot. I just get turned that around. So.
I guess it depends on the size of the organization and, what that request entails. I mean, anywhere from, low five figures all the way up to, probably high six figures, depending on the size of the content and the meat around the request.
So, and again, not Microsoft data. This is, I think, ISACA data that I'm pulling from. If you're familiar with them, highly recommend their Geek Week. It's been a number of years, like a pandemic ago, since I sat on one of those. But a great organization. They published a report saying the average cost of a subject's rights request was $1,700, 1702 and 28 cents. And the average number of data subject requests for an organization is 135. So that puts an average monthly cost at 230K. Now, again, I don't know were these publicly traded companies. I mean, obviously, someone like Bank of America is going to have more subjects rights requests than, Joe's Shirt Shack down in Panama City, right? So but those are real world numbers, and it's indicative of what I said earlier. When you have new regulation coming down and you have a problem to remedy, what's the first thing businesses do? They throw bodies at it, and bodies are expensive. And we all know privacy regulation is here. We all know it's not going away. So the question, I think, is how do you maintain compliance with a higher level of efficiency and at a lower cost?
Yeah, well, I
That
mean,
I
at,
think.
at those numbers, that becomes a P&L line item. I mean, that's not chump change that you can just easily write off, especially when it's recurring.
Oh
And
yeah.
if it's correlated back to headcount, the number of requests that come in, that number, if your business is doing well and your headcount is growing, the request number goes up, the monetary value goes up. So it's something you have to start to track and budget for. So there's more eyes on it. So yeah,
Well, and that's
that's
just
200 grand a
one
month. That's a big number.
aspect. That's just
Yeah,
one aspect of this topic. I mean, it doesn't even include penalties should you fall out of compliance
right.
or not being able to fulfill a
Yeah,
subject
that's
rights
green check
request.
marks across the board.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Bare minimum, probably.
Big money, big money. No whammies.
One, I think to kind of stick around that, right? It probably all is going to come back to automation and workflow, right? Having something around that instead of just throwing bodies. So, we've been talking about Priva. We've talked a lot about really the side of privacy risk management. I may butcher the name of our product, but which is not good. It's the Microsoft employee, but the other side is the subject matter request, right? We do have a part of Priva that talks about that, which gets into what you're kind of talking about was, hey, that's the automation, the workflow that we can put into place. Can you just talk a little bit, 101 level, whatever it is, kind of what we can do from that perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So, typically the way a subject's rights request will initiate is that subject calls up their call center or sends an email or somehow notifies the organization saying, hey, I want to invoke my right to be forgotten. So you need to tell me what all of my stuff you have and you need to get rid of it. And so, thing number one, okay, catcher's mitt. We got the request.
Yeah.
So then we need to go and gather all associated data, which, if you don't have your data estate in order, I don't see how anyone can do that. Right. I mean, if you just with a basic O365 subscription, you can go and pull anyone's PII in your tenant. I'm assuming you've got a few deft queries already preloaded for your OLTP applications to look at those. But, if you've got petabytes of UNC file shares underneath people's desks or something like that, how are you going to look there? Right? Because that
And
is
they all
still,
touch 9 other things.
oh yeah. I mean, that is GDPR impactful, right? I mean, GDPR doesn't care if your data is in the cloud or on-prem. So, you got the request, you gather all information, which I hope you have your data estate in order, and then you look at that data and maybe you have to redact it, right? Because if it's a file with 10 other people's PII, you need to redact those 9 other people and only highlight the subject that is germane to the request at hand. So there's some editing, some redacting that has to go on to compile all of that payload, that package together. And then you have to look at it through the regulatory lenses. And I'm not talking about just GDPR. I'm talking about everything. You may have, so like growing up at Atlanta Gas Light, we had to keep service orders for a period of 7 years because if,
Like turn my
there,
gas on service order.
yeah, yeah. So like, and again, I am not authorized to speak on Atlanta Gas Light. This was 20 some odd years ago. But generally companies have to keep business artifacts for a certain period of time because they could be subpoenaed for a court. If there's a house fire, they're going to subpoena and see what all work was done on the gas line there recently. So, I mean, you have to keep business artifacts for a period of time. That is normal across every industry. So if so-and-so that called in wanting their data deleted, but you got another piece of regulation that says, no, you actually have to keep these bits of data for 7 years and those bits of data for 10 years. That's, I don't care what GDPR says. It's like, who do you want to piss off the least, right?
Yeah.
So it's looking at that payload of PII data that has been assembled through the various regulatory lenses, and then giving you a nice, pretty audit-worthy report on, okay, Mr. or Miss Subject, here's what all we deleted, and here's what all we had to keep for 7 years because of this law, and here's what all we have to keep for another 3 for a total of 10 years because of that law. So we'll delete that then. Here's the best we can do now. Everybody happy? We good? I mean, that's what a data subject request looks like.
Just hearing that hypothetical makes my head spin. I mean, that can go in any number of directions, 1,000 miles an hour.
Oh yeah.
So you touched briefly on automation, and I'm going to take a little bit of a leap here with jumping over to artificial intelligence at a very high level. I know we've got some preview things that are coming out, and people are starting to test them, but just at a high level, and I guess kind of keeping it around the tone of security. Where do you see AI touching security, helping security, or maybe even on the flip side of that, hurting security?
AI is a tool, and the bad actors are going to be using it. That's a given.
Oh yeah.
AI is a tool, and the good actors, the security practitioners, the ones that are going to be keeping the bad actors in check, they're going to be using AI as well. I think a lot, I mean, we've got all the Copilot stuff, and the security Copilot that's making a lot of big noise and waves, and yeah, it's wicked cool and I can't wait for it to get here. But honestly, what I'm more excited about is the threat intelligence infused into Sentinel. Because right now, you can, if you are using Sentinel and you subscribe to our threat intelligence service, that's a free feed into Sentinel, so it's all there. But right now, to go as an end user and use threat intelligence, it's a web portal, and I query all these different articles, and then I use those learnings and incorporate those into my Custo queries and Sentinel. Uh, AI is going to speed that up tremendously and lower the barrier of entry to be a threat hunter and security practitioner. Right now, there's a pretty steep learning curve. You have to learn query languages. You have to learn how to navigate the different articles, and if you're a best of breed shop, you have to correlate that across a bunch of different data sources. It AI is gonna make that job a lot easier.
And like you said, you have to. I mean, the threat actors are going to take advantage of anything and everything at their disposal. So, when we start having these conversations about AI, I hear my mom's voice in the back of my head. Well, it scares me, and it's dangerous, and they're watching. Well, some of that may be true. I don't really think so, but like when you think about the organizations that are out there and causing nation state things to take place, they're going to leverage anything and everything under the sun to find that golden jackpot.
Yep.
And like you said, it's data out. So as long as you can learn how to leverage it, good data in, you get good data out. And if you're putting bad data in, you're getting bad data out.
Yeah. So again, this is not an official Microsoft position. This is just one guy with a sport joke and some moderately funny jokes. His opinion. Phishing is still the primary attack vector. And most fish mail is pretty easily sniffed out, right? It's got a wonky language in it, or an egregious font, or it's complete gibberish, and you're like, all right, bye-bye. Those days are soon going to be over, because someone in another country that doesn't even know how to speak English can leverage AI to spearfish
Oh yeah.
at will. So you're no longer talking about throwing a net out and seeing, how many guppies can I, rein in. You are crafting, not handcrafting, but AI crafting individual rounds, highly
Artistically.
specialized, highly targeted on specific targets. That is the first move I'm expecting from the bad actors using AI.
But on the flip side of that, don't we have the ability to leverage that same tool to say, you know, pick up on these 3 areas of interest that may dictate that this was artificially generated? I mean, I don't have the answer to that, but I would think you could use that same technology against it.
So our threat intel will leverage AI and ML and all that. We're already doing that with our intelligent security graph to learn who and where and from what infrastructure, and even what characteristics of that infrastructure, what time of day, what, how many do they release at once, all of those other types of aspects to slide the risk meter up or down for a given area of the internet. So, that's one thing we're definitely going to do or are doing to counter that. The other thing is going to be all that end user training, having those guide rails pop up, the blinky flashy thing, so and so's from outside of your organization. Because this message contains this, it might, be a little bit more suspicious. But just, sending and receiving mail from people that you don't normally send and receive to and from, that is, I believe that should be a more prominent indicator in the end user experience. I mean, we have that capability. You can do it today. Make sure you have those policy tips turned on. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm rambling, but
No, that's good. So I'm going to ask one final question before I turn it over to Vitaly to ask the final question. And the final question is one that requires you to put on your thinking cap and hypothesize just a little bit. So prepare yourself for that. But you mentioned a minute ago the feed that you can subscribe to, and we've got a. Are you familiar with the CCP threads for privacy? And it's basically I'll put a link in the description at the bottom, but it's basically it's a thread of users and Microsoft employees that you can subscribe to. Basically, um, I'm gonna call it a blog. That's not the right term for it, but it's a feed of how people are using it, how are they leveraging it, and there's one dedicated to privacy. And if it's something that you're listening to this, so that sounds interesting, there is a trial that can be spun up, and it's aka.ms/try privacy management. And again, I'll put that link at the bottom. But that was just a good segue to turn it over to Mr. Vitaly for the final question.
Yes, these are the 12 personal. No, I'm just kidding. It's just one question. So yeah, we've asked this to all of our guests. So just kind of a fun question, but you're a new CISO at your dream company, whatever that is. What is the first move? What would you change? What would you implement?
ugh, that is a loaded question, man.
Asking a sales guy to step into a CISO role, I guess, is the
You,
first part of it
you
being
could, hey,
loaded.
you could go back to your consulting days and say it depends.
Well, no, I'm gonna steal a page out of the Jim Eckert playbook. He's a good buddy of mine, also here in Atlanta, former chief information security officer for the Coca-Cola company. He's now a blue badge Microsoft employee, and he manages our global team of chief security advisors. So, when Jim speaks, I listen. One of the first things that Jim did when he took a CISO role, not talking about any specific company, caveat, cover my posterior, but one of the things he did before he even took the job, I mean, this was part of the negotiation for him coming on, was to have a third-party firm of his choosing come in and do an assessment and kind of size up the shop and see where they stood. So if I were to become a CISO somewhere, I would make that part of the onboarding agreement, and I would make sure I had an objective outside third party expert opinion on here are your biggest voids and gaps, and here's what you need to work on first. That kind of a vague, safe, non-juicy answer, but it's the honest truth.
No, but
No, it's a
very,
great
very
answer.
logical.
Smart answer, actually.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Love it.
Well, Grady, we just wanted to say thank you for your time today. I know we're getting into Q4 and everybody's busy, so for you taking your time today, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, aside from ringing your cell phone, what's the easiest way to get Mr. Boggs on the phone?
LinkedIn, email, cell phone. I am like the only Grady Boggs on the internet. I am like crazy easy to find.
Perfect.
Yeah. And because of a number of breaches, all my PII is out on the internet too. So you can find me.
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, Grady, thank you so much. And we hope you have a good vacation, which is right around the corner.
Yes, sir. Have a good
Absolutely.
time off. Thanks for doing
It
this.
was a pleasure,
Appreciate it.
guys. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir.
You have a great day.
You too.
Shall we play a game?